What's up, everybody? I'm Kevin. This is Haunted by Horror, and today I'm talking about Scream. When this movie came out, no one thought a teen slasher movie would have such a huge impact on the cultural lexicon. It seemed like the genre was past its prime, like they had done everything there was to be done. And then along came Scream and changed everything. In most slasher movies, the teens are expendable. We just want to see what creative ways the boogeyman of that particular movie is going to dispatch with them. But Scream had interesting, well-rounded characters whose deaths you felt the impact of, whose fate you actually cared about. At the end of Scream, you don't root for the killers. You root for Sidney, you root for Dewey, you root for Gail. I guess you root for Randy. The point is, you're on their side. You're on the side of the victims. In most horror movies, you want Jason to win. You want Freddy to win. But Scream was different. There were some very obvious references to other horror movies in Scream. Hell, in several scenes, characters outright reference other movies. But there were also lots of more subtle nods to tons of classic horror movies. It was full of witty dialogue and had tons of horror movie in-jokes. It was smarter than other slashers without being disrespectful to them. It was really a love letter to the slasher genre. If you ask a random person on the street today who the killer was in Friday the 13th, there's a good chance that they know it was Pamela Voorhees, whether or not they've ever seen Friday the 13th. But before Scream, a lot of people would have said that it was Jason. How many other horror movies do you know of that corrected a common misconception that the public at large held about another horror movie? Sometimes it even referenced audience critiques of the slasher genre. One notable example is in the scene where Sidney is on the phone with the killer and she says,
"We're all the same. Some stupid killer stalking some big-breasted girl who can't act, who's always running up the stairs when she should be going out the front door. It's insulting." Which
is a common criticism levied against slasher films. But when she's attacked, and it's very clear why she does this here. She struggles with the door, and to avoid the killer, she runs up the stairs. This movie really excelled at including little things like this. It was a movie about killers who were obsessed with slasher movies, and so they went out and got a cheap Walgreens Halloween mask and started killing people. And that's actually something that I think a lot of younger people may not realize, is that the mask in Scream predates Scream. It was just a cheap Halloween mask that you could buy at any drugstore until Scream came along and made it as iconic as it is today. There was actually 3 or 4 different ones, I'm not sure. But they were all really similar to this mask, but they were all a little bit different. The one that I had like arched brows, kind of like a jack-o'-lantern, and I think it had like fangs. But, so yeah, this Scream mask was just a random-ass Halloween mask before Scream. Not everyone loves Scream. There are, of course, people who don't like horror movies in general. But there were also horror fans who didn't care for this movie. There were some who didn't like it for the same reason that they don't like the album that put their formerly favorite band on the map. It was too mainstream, they sold out, it was too approachable. Basically, they didn't want to let all these new kids into their secret club. Other people felt that it was too tame. The kills were more subdued than what they were used to from a lot of slashers, which are often focused almost exclusively on how crazy the kills are. And there was no nudity. This was one of the only horror movies that my grandma would actually sit down and watch with me. Of course, the 90s was kind of a weird time. Parents in the 90s seemed to have no problem with kids watching movies full of blood and guts, but if there were breasts in a movie, that was a much bigger deal. It's like they looked at the MPAA rating and went, violence, strong language, drug use. Yeah, that's all fine. Oh wait, this movie has nudity in it. Hell no, we're not renting this. Of course, A lot of people still seem to be kind of like that, so Scream was released just before Christmas in 1996, and it took a while to gain steam, but once it did, it had a huge impact on horror. It basically created its own subgenre. For a time during the late 90s and early 2000s, it seemed like everyone was trying to cash in on the success of Scream by copying the same basic formula with a few minor tweaks. They all had glossy cinematography, hip modern music, and popular teen stars culled from the WB primetime lineup. Many of them were even penned by Kevin Williamson himself. Some of these movies include The Faculty, Disturbing Behavior, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Halloween H2O, Valentine, Teaching Mrs. Tingle, Urban Legend, Dracula 2000, Final Destination, Swim Fan, House of Wax. The list goes on, but you get the idea. Everyone was copying Scream. And many of these movies were successful in their own right, but none of them has remained anywhere near as culturally relevant as Scream. Today, it's considered a classic and constantly listed alongside the movies that it paid homage to. And with good reason. It's a good movie, and probably the defining horror film of our generation. Well, thank you for watching my video. Have a good night.